I love you, God. You give me strength. God is my rock and my place of safety. This is the God who saves me. My God is my rock. I go to God for safety. God is like a shield to me. God is the power that saves me. God is my place of safety. I called out to God who is worthy of praise. God saved me from my enemies. The ropes of death were almost wrapped around me. A destroying flood swept over me. The ropes of the grave were tight around me. Death set its trap in front of me. When I was in trouble, I called out to God. I cried to God for help. And from his temple, God heard my voice. My cry for help reached God's ears. God reached down from on high and took hold of me. God drew me up out of deep waters. God rescued me from my powerful enemy, from my foes who were too strong for me. They confronted me in the day of my disaster, but God was my support. God brought me out into a broad place. God rescued me because God delighted in me. This is the word of God.
So the gospel reading today comes from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 2, verses 41 and following. Now every year his parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. And when Jesus was 12 years old, they went up as usual for the festival. When the festival was ended and they started to return, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but his parents didn't know it. Assuming that he was in the group of travelers, they went a day's journey. Then they started to look for him among their relatives and friends. When they didn't find him, they returned to Jerusalem to search for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, "Child, why have you treated us like this? Look, your father and I have been searching for you in great anxiety." Jesus said to them, "Why were you searching for me? Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house?" They didn't understand what he said to them. Then he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was obedient to them. His mother treasured all these things in her heart, and Jesus increased in wisdom and in years and in divine and human favor. So I got to admit that school starting again snuck up on me this summer. Here I was thinking that we were just lollygagging in the midst of summer, the midst of a slower schedule, and what about 3 different teachers in my life were like, "No, I'm going back to school this week. Got to go set up my room, I got meetings, I got things going on." My reaction was, yikes, how can it be that time of year already? And so not only was that a change in my thinking, but it also spun me off into wondering about education, about growth, about growing up. And I thought about how teachers give their all so that kids can do that kind of healthy growing up, growing into knowledge and even some values and experiences that are going to form them into adults that they're going to be. And we expect that growing, we expect that maturing, we expect that process in kids, don't we? We send them to school going, "Please grow up," on some level. Am I right? Some of our parents are still hoping we grow up a little bit more. But that's just me. So often we settle into our jobs, we settle into our routines, we settle into our careers and families, and we can stop looking to our own growing up. We can stop tending our own maturing process. And yes, some of us can take classes, some of us can build our knowledge, we can acquire a couple of new skills here and there, but many of us stop thinking about our journey of how do we keep growing especially spiritually? How do we keep developing? How does this year become a new taking off point for me getting better in and growing into more wisdom, more insight, more mature ways of responding? So conveniently, the church, in her wisdom, offers us this whole long season from Pentecost to Advent as a season to focus on our growing, on our maturing. And guess what? All of nature is proclaiming this and inviting us to it. If you look outside, the trees, the big shrubs, not the wildflowers, don't look at the wildflowers right now, right? But the trees, the shrubs, all the bigger, they're growing like crazy. We have these long days of sunshine. All their juices are flowing, right? They're growing like crazy. River brings flowers, fresh flowers, because they're abundant this time of year. They're growing like crazy. How about us? How are we growing? How are you intent on your own growth? This whole season, it's about 5 or 6 months, actually, that we have now, where we're supposed to take all the goodies that we learned about in our holy days, even from Christmas and Easter, Pentecost, these big celebrations. We don't just celebrate like Pentecost was in June. We don't just celebrate the blessing and go, great, we're blessed. Now we can rest. No. You're blessed to go into the world, to grow, to embody these things, to strive, to become that voice of God in the world, to become the being that God is calling you to be. And so, today is another wake-up call, hopefully, to get us started, to say, come on, let's go. Let's get to our growth. Let's get to it. Also, conveniently, we are working our way through the Gospel of Luke. And some of us have been taught that the Gospels are just 4 different eyewitness accounts. Yeah, they're a little bit different. I would beg to differ. And if you're looking for a different view of that, I'll be presenting a class in the fall that is about quadratos and a different way to see the 4 Gospels. Because each has its beauty. Each has its deeper wisdom. And part of the underlying wisdom of Luke's message is that it's a teaching and challenge about how we are to grow, how we're supposed to mature in our faith and in our lives, in our faithfulness, and really doing the work on becoming those whole people that God is calling us to be. The reason I chose this passage this morning is that in our weekly Bible study, we're talking about it. It came up, and I was reminded that many of us have been taught that Jesus came into the world as kind of poof, this fully formed, perfect human being with all the knowledge and wisdom of God and could deal with all the craziness of the world, no problem. The Gospel of Luke would beg to differ with you. The Gospel of Luke presents it very, very differently. Here we have Luke presenting Jesus in the temple as a boy, 12 years old. And he's hanging out there and he's learning. He's a boy and he's learning. Yes, we're told that they're impressed with his answers, but we also get that he's sitting there listening and learning and absorbing. Well, guess what? This isn't just for him. This is a model for all of us. How do we keep growing? How do we keep deepening? How do we keep attending to God to move in the ways we think, to shift in the ways that we respond to other people, to figure out new ways of absorbing somebody's criticism or critique so we have a more mature response than maybe some politicians we know who just want to swing back and call names. Don't we look at that and we say, gosh, that's not a very mature way of responding? Well, what about us? How do we respond in different ways? So since I was, just a little fun thing here, since I was talking about teachers going back to school, I'm going to ask you to be a fair grader of yourself right now. So in the ways of your spiritual formation, as spiritual beings, how would you grade yourself? Not too harsh, not giving passes, but how would you grade yourself? How developed, how mature are you in ways of spirit? ways of God. How God is calling us, how you understand God is calling us to be in this world. Modeling values of grace and compassion and justice and hope and peace in each moment. Where are your strengths? Where are your weaknesses? I'm not going to ask you to share how you're grading yourself, so nobody's going to know. But where are you being challenged in that? Where can you improve? Where do you want to improve? Where do you want to do better? I'll tell you, I've been married for 17 years now. And if I was the same, if I responded to my wife the same way today as I did when I was first married, we would be in deep trouble. I've grown, I've shifted, I've changed, I've had to. I've seen new things. I've understood the world in a different way with somebody else helping me to do that. And I've been willing to change, to grow, to deepen, to mature. How about us? How about you? It's interesting, I was running this idea past some folks, some sounding boards, and one person said, Erik, you know that's not how people generally think about themselves, right? People generally don't think about growing and maturing. They just try to get through their lives, just do what's happening right in front of them. And some of the lines that I've heard when I've talked with people is, that's just the way I am. Or, I couldn't possibly change now. I'm X number of years old. Or, that's the way I'm wired. Or, I couldn't possibly learn to respond differently now. I would suggest to us that all of those are signs of stagnation. All of those keep us trapped in some ways into who we've been, not who we can become. All of us, no matter what age or stage of your life, all of us can grow and mature. The biggest issue is, are we willing to work on it? In spiritual direction, often I listen to people. As pastor, I often listen to people. And I hear quite often so many of us say that we have these kind of understandings within us. You may call them voices. They're just stuff from our parents, stuff from our past, stuff from experiences. And some of them have been with us for decades, for many, many, many years, and they've grown in influence in us. And so when we're talking about growing, it means we have to move beyond some of those things. And yet some of them fight back. Some of them want to just hold us back because they have such deep roots. My question, though, is how long do we really want to let them live in there? How long do we really want to let some of those voices that demean us and diminish us and hold us back make us less loving, make us more judgmental, for example? A competitive voice which always pits us against each other. How long do we want to let that have free rein? How long? What will it take to get to a point where we say, gosh darn it, I need to move on from this. I need to grow. I need to mature a little bit in this particular way. There's a saying in the recovery community that you have to get sick and tired of being sick and tired before you actually start to do the work to make the changes to get more healthy. What's it going to take for you to be sick and tired enough to grow into something new, to deepen into something new, to mature into something new? Let's be clear that my hope is that time is today for all of us. Right? Set our feet on the ground, get a firm foundation, say, okay, enough. Today, I'm starting to do this a new way. This is a new beginning for me, where we become more clear and committed to embodying the ways of Spirit, to tending Spirit in our lives, not just for Sunday morning, not just at morning prayer, but to say, gosh, 24/7, I'm working to tend spirit and to live gentleness, grace, compassion, self-control. And how do we grow into those values? Grow into those attributes of spirit so that we can stop getting triggered by the same things that have always triggered us. Stop getting frustrated. Stop getting angry at the same things that have always made us angry. And then afterward, we go back, we're like, I'm sorry I got angry. Gosh darn it, I'll do better next time. How about today is that next time? How about today we start to do things differently? As I watch the news, one of the most disturbing things that I've consistently heard is spiritually infantile behavior and thinking and speaking in some of our highest elected officials. Some people in the news continually seem to have never grown into a more enlightened and wise human being. Anybody notice that? Somebody, very thin-skinned politicians, somebody says something and they fight back instantly instead of having more mature, thoughtful response of, gosh, why do you say that? That's interesting. Can you tell me more? Any of those kind of ways of thinking. I heard actually one report from a pastor, a report of a pastor from Idaho who recently opened a new branch of his church in Washington, D.C. And Pete Hegseth and his wife attended the opening ceremonies. And this pastor's crusade is to make the U.S. into a Christian theocracy, where Christ is the head of the country. He believes in a patriarchal society where women are expected to submit to their husbands, where Jews and Muslims and others are just not welcome. Women, sorry about this, but you would be banned from leadership positions, and he wants to repeal the 19th Amendment to keep women from voting. It would just be households that would vote instead of everybody. There are other pieces to his beliefs that I hope we can agree with are absolutely appalling and disturbing. And if we look at them, doesn't it seem like that's going to a very basic place? It's drawing us backward in our development, drawing us backward to a more insecure place, to a more male-dominated society. Don't we, I won't say we, my understanding of a more mature understanding is that women are created in the image of God also. And of course they would be able to vote. Of course they have a voice. Of course they should be in leadership, along with everybody else. Our policies should reflect that equality. And to my mind, a mature outlook can hold spirituality and science at the same time and be informed by both. We can hear somebody's objections and even condemnations and not be totally offended and not need to attack the other person, but engage in dialogue about the issues. And if you're wondering about a journey of spiritual maturity, I put this handout out front just so you'd have something to, I was going to say hold on to as I dropped it. That was clever of me. But this is Richard Rohr's understanding of growing in spiritual maturity. And the superficial level is my body and self-image are who I am. We focus on our own security, our safety, and defense needs. And it goes all the way down to I am who I am, which is that kind of holy understanding, that holy definition. It's just me, warts and all. Kind of what you get every Sunday morning with me, right? We are all now fully detached from our own self-image and living in God's image of us, which includes and loves both the good and the bad. We experience true serenity and freedom. This is the peace the world cannot give, and full resting in God. And there he has another, 7 layers in between that. But I just offer that to you so that you can see that there are some tangible words to explain some of this. I want to encourage you in your own growth, your own maturity, and some of us need to look and see how we're doing and what might next steps be. What might we be shooting for? What might be pitfalls for us? And so I offer you that sheet. I think I didn't make enough copies. If you want one and don't have one, let me know. Happy to make more copies. So where do you need to grow? Where do you need to mature? Where are you being called to that? If Jesus had to grow and mature, I think that's a good model for us. And this is absolutely a spiritual reality. We all need work. We all have rough edges. We all have things we can grow in. None of us are perfect. We all need to grow and mature in spirit and the ways of God, and it's never too late. It just isn't. But can we apply ourselves to it? The world needs it. The world needs us, kind of desperately in these moments. So may today be the day that we get to work on it again. Amen? Amen.